And now, your feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled movie review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck. Alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Well, I've been kissed by a rose on a grave.
Today we are reviewing the Showtime series Yellowjackets Season 1. You might go, what? This is a movie podcast. Yeah, well, everything's closed in Ontario, and we do review TV sometimes. Usually it's tangentially attached to some sort of film property, whether it's the MCU, Star Wars, Cobra Kai, Mighty Ducks, you know, that kind of thing, or from a big director that a filmmaker that we love. But you know what, Eric and I have been watching Yellowjackets, and we wanted to fucking talk about it because
Everybody's been watching
I
it.
know I got hooked, Nevis got hooked, Eric got hooked, everyone's gotten hooked. So we want to do a full review of the first season of Yellowjackets. I think we're gonna go full spoilers because I mean it's out now. The whole season's out. It's not like one of our pre-release reviews where we kind of have to be afraid of spoilers. And I think we'll have a better conversation being able to talk about the entire first season and what happened and where we think the series will go and things like that. So just fair warning, if you haven't watched Jackets yet, I think quick thoughts, Eric, we can give our quick thoughts for people, spoiler free. I think it's definitely worth your time. I got completely addicted. I think it's nasty and disturbing. Has great characters and great mysteries. I think I would have maybe loved it even more if it was a mini series and just wrapped everything out nicely in one really, really tight season. I am a little bit worried about it kind of just extending the story for extending its sake, but we'll go deeper into that in a sec. But I definitely think it's worth your time and was one of the more addicting watches in recent memory, where I was craving that next episode. And while everything didn't work, I still think it is absolutely worth your time. Some great character actors giving some great performances. I love the editing, which I'll get into, and things like that. But spoiler free, I think it's definitely worth your time to give the first season a shot.
I agree. And we've talked about this on the show a couple of times where, it's sometimes more interesting to watch a show unfold on a weekly basis than just simply binge watching. And I think this series benefits quite a bit from the week by week release of a new episode, where if this were to premiere on Netflix per se and have all 10 episodes available at once, there would be that kind of that weekend that maybe the month in as a whole where people are watching it and catching up to it and talking about it, but then it kind of would run its course and people would move on to the next thing or forget about it. It'd be more disposable. But because it was this weekly thing that kind of built word of mouth, it wasn't really even marketed that much. I mean, we're not TV guys in general, unless it is related to a film or a big director is attached to it. So like we came to it, at least I did, was through you and through Twitter and social media kind of talking about it and hearing comparisons to things like Lost and even survival thrillers, whether they be The Grey or Alive or things like that, or The Revenant, and sort of looking at it from that point of view. So going into it, I was thinking, okay, is this going to be sort of almost like something like Big Little Lies, or as I like to call it, Big Little Alive? But then it kind of turns into a really interesting show about survival guilt, but also it has this supernatural kind of sprinkling throughout that kind of is like hinting at maybe there's something more to this and maybe there's not. Yes, we both realize that the showrunners, their their idea for this was going to be 5 seasons. Like they've
I did not know
specified.
that going in, but that's fair.
Yeah, so it's the idea is that it's a 5-season arc for these characters in this sort of world that they've created. But to your point, and I think that this would have benefited so much more if it was a miniseries, and whether it was 10 episodes or a little bit longer to kind of conclude it.
13 or something, yeah.
I think the biggest problem with this, and we'll go into kind of details with the series as a whole, but the world that it's created in the both past and present tense is a bit of a divide. I think the stuff that happens in the past when we're learning about the characters in the survival situation, because the storyline is that you have a group of high school students who are national soccer champions going to this championship game, and they fly out, and this takes place in 1996, and them crash landing in Ontario, in the Ontario wilderness specifically, and being stranded and having to fend for themselves for a year and a half, and then it kind of connecting or intersecting with the present day taking place in 2021, 25 years later, and the survivors of the crash going on with their lives but still carrying the trauma of the past 25 years, and some things coming back to haunt them in ways that they're not expecting it to, and sort of manifesting themselves in other ways in their lives with the survivors. So the stuff in the present isn't as interesting, but it's also doing this weird thing where it's doing like the reverse Hitchcock thing of like the surprise or suspense, like when you see a Hitchcock character in a scene and you as the audience know something is happening, like seeing the bomb under the table or under the chair, you know what's going on, but the character doesn't. And that creates the surprise or the suspense or the tension in the building of it. But because the characters know what happened 25 years earlier, it becomes this big media kind of frenzy and everybody knows it. The person that is most surprised or shocked by any revelations or big reveals is you, and not them, the characters in the situation. And I think that kind of hurts the storytelling a little bit, and it also does feel quite drawn out at times. Like any one episode feels like there's maybe one or two really kind of juicy moments to kind of chew on, and then everything else kind of feels like it's a bridge to the next episode, or it's kind of, giving you little bits to kind of work your way up to the next big reveal. But it's all very drawn out, but it's still addictive in watching it, because I felt myself still captivated by the material to tune in to the next episode
same.
each and every week.
And that's good TV. And I'm glad to hear that you said that they have like a 5-season plan, because like that's the criticism. I mean, the comparisons to Lost, I think are fair with this show. I think one of the things we worried about, that it's not like Lost, where you're getting 22 episode seasons with no end in sight, and there's the Jack Tattoo episode, or there's going to be an episode of them in the woods where they they find a soccer ball and play that the whole time or something. I'm getting a phone call. Great. But I don't know what that is. I'm sorry about that. I don't know. Like yeah, I'm a little torn on it as a whole. I still think I'm eagerly anticipating the second season. And we'll get kind of into that in a sec. So yeah, I definitely think it's worth a watch. I am glad to hear that they have an end game, or like an end in sight. I think maybe 5 seasons is pushing it, depending on what we got out of this, and I have no idea where they would go for 5 seasons of content, but we'll talk about that. So let's get into spoiler territory. because I really feel like that's where we'll get into the kind of meat and potatoes of things. So, or the meat of things.
Yeah.
So
This
let's
is
just
definitely one of those shows, or like any show or movie that makes you question whether or not you should go vegan or vegetarian. Um, Especially with how heightened the sound design is and some of the visuals in that first episode, because the first episode, what it does is it works in this weird kind of flashback within a flashback where you're introduced to, and this is why I originally thought watching this was a mini series. I didn't realize until the end of the episode and then looking it up online that it
Mhm.
was actually a series, because the way that it's
I think I was in the same boat. Yeah.
yeah, the way it introduces sort of the lurid quality of what the show is, which is survivalism at its sort of most primal, which is, this group of high school soccer players turning into cannibals and eating each other. You see that in that opening scene, and sort of like a trap being set, and you think, okay, like this is where we'll get by the end of the
Yeah.
series, right?
Or this
Well,
season, I thought.
yeah, or that's what I mean. Like when I thought it
Sorry.
was
Yeah.
like a
A
mini
mini
series,
series.
like
Yeah.
that's where we'll get, like we'll see everything kind of like come full circle, because that's usually how these kind of like foreshadowing scenes kind of work, right? But no, then it kind of sets it up like almost like Big Little Lies, where you're thinking like you're getting like this documentary-esque sort of present day, like, oh, do you remember what happened to these people and this flight and this school? And then you get interviews with people that talk about their, where were they when it happened, or like, after the aftermath, and like what life was like for them coming back and into reintegrating into society. And it almost does have like this weird sort of faux documentary style to it. And then that's kind of dropped because you're introduced to a few of the present day characters that you'll be following throughout the run of this season, with Natalie, Shauna, and Thaisa. And each one of those characters kind of going their own way after the events that took place 25 years later, and how they've all kind of gone on their own paths and have their own lives, and also how they're kind of struggling still with the events that took place in the wilderness, and what they did and what they feel they have done to other people and themselves, and sort of their careers and lives and all that kind of intermixing. And what I think is the best stuff of this film is, again, the past tense stuff, because as it's happening in almost like a real time thing to the younger versions of these characters, it's more of a surprise to them as well. And so
Yeah.
you're kind of you're as shocked and surprised by what's happening as they are, where when things are kind of presented to you in the present day, it's just withholding information. It's
Mhm.
just kind of almost like, okay, well, when you get this reveal that this character, like at the end of this, I'm going to jump right to the
We're
end
in
of
full
this.
spoilers, so do
Yes,
whatever you want. Yeah.
the end of the season, where we find out that Lottie, who becomes kind of
The
almost
Antler
like this
Queen.
cult leader, because
Mhm.
again, when you take the societal aspects out of people, and you give them little hope, and then magical thinking kind of comes into play. And then again, like the show is hinting that there is maybe some supernatural stuff there,
Yeah,
but it
whether
might
Lottie
not
can
be.
talk to the devil or something, I don't know.
Yeah, and so Lottie still being alive is something that probably all the characters in the present day already
New.
know,
Yeah.
but we don't. Not until the end of the episode, when
So like, why wouldn't they bring it up before?
exactly,
Right?
like,
Like,
or like, are there other people that survived this? Like who survived
definitely.
and who
Yeah.
didn't? Because the only person you really know for sure that didn't survive is Jackie.
But even then, I was guessing the whole series going, is Jackie alive? Because they don't, and I think they want you to think that because Jackie doesn't actually die. The younger Jackie, I guess there is no older Jackie, but we find out Jackie dies in the final episode where she freezes to death.
But I think like when Shauna, played by Melanie Lynskey, and her husband,
Go to
played by
dinner,
Warren
yeah.
Kole, go to
Lunch or
Jackie's
whatever.
parents' place for the birthday, for Jackie's birthday, and it's like a yearly thing that they do, and it's kind of, again, a guilt trip for them, for those two characters specifically. And it's also interesting because Jackie's parents reference that they're reading Elena Ferrante, and Elena Ferrante wrote The Lost Daughter, and The Lost Daughter also goes back and forth between the past and present. So I feel like there is like a little bit of like a meta joke there.
Similar editing too in both movies, because like I liked the editing in that first episode. Sorry, we're jumping around a lot, but just to give a highlight to the editing, because I felt like it did a really good job for me to go, oh, that's the older person of that. Like just the way that they did those cuts of like they would cut from the younger actress to the older actress in the present. And I'm with you where the present day stuff wasn't as interesting, and we'll go deeper into that. I just found the editing in that first episode, when you find out who is alive in the present or whose stories we're following in the present and how they would intercut with their past versions, I think, it's a pretty classic way of showing that. But I thought this show did a really good job to set that all up. And to your point with Lottie, and you're making great points about the present day stuff where it seems like these characters would, especially when they're trying to figure out the mystery of who's sending them these postcards and like who is doing this stuff, like why would they not bring up Lottie if they know that she escaped with them and she is alive, unless they didn't know that, or she stayed
but
out
then
there.
how would you, like, you think that like that would have even been talked about, because everybody sort of, again, knows what happened. Like like the character Taisha is running for state senator in New Jersey, and like there's this whole sort of like smear campaign by the opposition where like they use a photo of her eating ribs, and they're like,
there are
like,
rumors that they are cannibals, like or they were.
Yeah. And so like, again, it's the show itself is withholding from you because the characters already know this in terms of what's going on in 2021.
Of who knows what and what rumors are out there and who is alive and who's not. So I'm totally with you that all of the present day storylines never really hooked me. Like I guess I was sort of interested of like who was blackmailing them and stuff like that, or who knows what. And then you have the whole side plot with the fake journalist looking into them, who was hired by Thaisa and then is kidnapped by
Christina Ricci's Misty, who again is another one of the survivors, but she isn't really like like,
she wasn't on the team. She was like the helper, and she was the weird one they didn't like and things like that.
Yeah, she was kind of on the outside of that group.
She was like the nerdy girl who was with all the athletes, and she was an outcast a little bit.
But then she becomes, and I think that's the thing I like the most about this show is the way, and this is the other sort of main comparison that this show has gotten, is it's Lord of the Flies, and what makes Lord of the Flies and what works here with the survival thriller aspect is the change in social dynamic and how we see in the first couple of episodes, and it does it really well, where the character Jackie is somebody that is kind of in charge.
Like
she is the alpha,
the captain.
And like, even the coach talks about like her being the one, like, you're maybe not the greatest player, but you have the most influence over everybody else. And then in also being the most affluent of the group. And then when they're in the survival situation, you see that dynamic, that power that she has slowly dissipating and going to people like Misty, because she has training in
first aid
and Red Cross and stuff like that. And then Jackie is somebody who doesn't really have much experience with the outdoors and the wilderness, and sort of how her becoming kind of bitter and also angry and frustrated with the others, and how the others are looking at her and kind of feeling like she's not chipping in and helping out. Like there's this interesting power dynamic and struggle that's going on. And even with the second coach, where like you're seeing the one kind of like adult of this group kind of having little or no power in sort of saying kind of like what happens, and like he's almost basically sidelined, which I think is really interesting because
And is that because he loses his leg and he probably kind of loses some of his, like, I don't know,
yeah,
masculinity or whatever you
well,
want to say
even
with that?
that with the
Yeah,
reveal that he's gay, and that, you know, like
that too. Yeah.
I think like in and the way that, you know, the women in this, or the young girls in this, are almost, they're not emasculating him, but it, again, like it's almost like, okay, well, you know, now we're in this situation, we're outside of the social construct of what we're used to,
Yeah.
so, you know, the rules change, and you see that happening slowly but surely with every new episode as things continually break down. There's as much hope kind of comes in with, like, you know, the rifle, and sort of Natalie and Travis being the two characters that can sort of fire it and you know, gather food. There's the problem of that there's a lack of food, you know, and it's getting close to winter, so
Hmm.
things are becoming even more barren. And then, you know, the Shauna character having an affair with Jackie's boyfriend and getting pregnant before leaving, and sort of how that complicates issues even more. And again, you have you know,
Rotisserie chicken baby.
yeah, you have this cabin out in the middle of the woods, which, you know, has a dead sort of doomsday prepper type who's
Killed
in the attic.
himself. Yeah.
But
And then,
also,
like,
again, is there something supernatural there? And there's also this, you know, creepy, weird, um no eye character, like this man with no eyes that keeps popping up here and there, and
and
it's
these
almost like
symbols that are all around
Bagul and
yeah.
Sinister.
Yeah, and there's all these like symbols out in the woods. So I'm totally with you that that's supernatural stuff, and that everything in the flashbacks. And like, part of me goes, was it a good idea to start with the? I think you needed a hook, so I'm kind of okay with saying like, yeah, they start eating each other, because then you're just waiting for like, because I think what was most intriguing about the show, because I had no idea what it was about. I just knew it was about some girls who their plane crash and they have to survive in the wilderness. And you know, you get that initial like, oh fuck, they're eating her. Like, oh, they just trapped this girl and they're eating her. And I'm like, holy shit, this show is way darker than I expected. And then it becomes way more violent and disturbing than I expected. I think some of the gore is really, really great and just intense and disgusting. And then I think it was smart to kind of show that right away, because I think the whole time I'm like, how do these group of girls get to that point? Because they're all wearing basically like pelts, and they the one leader has this big antler crown, and they're all kind of sitting, like 8 or 9 of them in this thing, and they're doing like creepy shit where they're sitting there and cooking this person and eating them. And like, then there are the teases of like, you know, the classic TV mystery stuff and the lost kind of elements of like the girl who falls in the pit at the beginning that they eat was wearing the same necklace that Jackie gives Shauna, that Shauna then gives back to Jackie, right? So then the whole time you're wondering, oh, that's Jackie who's in there, or was that Shauna, or whatever. And then ultimately it's neither of them. And then you're kind of going, oh, okay, so there's more there. And they were out there for a year and a half, right? And we've seen about probably 4 or 5 months, maybe like maybe half a year at the most, like six
Right.
months of the flashback stuff, because winter is just hitting and things like that. And like the show does such a good job of going, okay, I know they all become cannibals, I know they get rescued, but I'm still so intrigued to see how they get there and who makes it to the end and who was part of this weird cult thing that is going on where they eat people. And like, my thing there is that I assume that there is going to be like 2 different factions of the girls. Like, they ultimately split off between Lottie's followers and people who are like, we're not going to eat people. Like we can't do that. And maybe a few of them go off on their own. Cause it does look like it's, well, by the end of the season, we know Lottie, Misty, and the other, is it
Liv Huison's character.
Van.
Yeah.
So those three, and we knew Van because she had the same shirt on, because the girl who looks over the pit is wearing the same shirt Van wears throughout the season. So people started to piece that stuff together. And so they've left you with some intriguing mysteries. And like, I think you can tell by Eric and I talking that we haven't barely talked about the present day stuff where they're getting blackmailed by someone who's sending them postcards.
Shauna's having an affair with an artist who also,
and she thinks her husband is having an affair.
Background.
Yeah, and like you think that he might be involved in it, and then like Misty kidnaps the journalist person, keeps that person in the basement.
Who's actually a fixer for Taisha.
Yeah.
And then Taisha's running for state senator,
and
but
all of that
she's
stuff
also
is
tormenting her son,
because she's having you find out that she's sleepwalking and being creepy, and she has weird visions when she's sleepwalking, and like so I like that supernatural eeriness that is throughout the whole series that sort of plays into the present day stuff. But I just constantly found myself going like, I don't really care if Shauna's husband's cheating on her, or her daughter's kind of a brat, or if Taissa wins the state senate, or if Misty is still a psychopath, or
that Natalie's gotten out of
I think Natalie's stuff is sort of
and...
more interesting with Travis, and they sort of try to go into that, and you find out Travis kills himself, which you think that they think he was murdered because this symbols and candles and things like that. So, all of that was, I think, a very slow burn to the ultimate reveal that Lottie is alive and is like the head of this cult, or she continued it. And so, I mean, what I was thinking is like, okay, we always knew that more than those 3 or 4 of them escaped, right? Because they said some people were living off the grid or whatever.
Well, Travis is that one character. And then also the other tip off is that each episode seems to kind of be focused on a character in both past and present day. But then you have an episode. And then you have an episode where you see Lottie as basically a toddler, and how this one moment, how she's able to avoid a car accident because her parents are driving the car, and she kind of causes a distraction.
Like a premonition, doesn't she?
Yeah. And so like that kind of gives you a hint, I think, to say like, oh, this character is going to have more meaning overall with the show, and not just kind of be like the kind of like weird religious zealous kind of type. Because like another like the thing that I love about that trope as well, and the thing that's coming to mind that I think of is The Mist, where you have all those characters kind of in this grocery store, and logic and communication at first is being put into place, but then as soon as you introduce a supernatural element, it doesn't even have to be a survival element, but like a supernatural kind of component that's threatening these characters. And then you have someone like Marcia Gay Harden's sort of religious, she's a complete asshole, take over and convince enough people that this is biblical or supernatural based, and that the Lord will be your savior. And the more people you can convince to get on your side, it shows you like there's that, again, power dynamic and shift, and how you can prey upon people's fear of the unknown and not being able to explain things. And I think that is, again, where this show ultimately leads in that final episode, where you're seeing this rift between this group, and how over the course of however long this is, 4 or 5 months before winter starts kind of kicking in, how civilized individuals who are going on this trip to play a soccer match, which seems trivial in the big picture, becomes something so horrific, and again, like, reverts back to like this primal sort of instinct of just doing whatever you have to survive, and not really thinking about the consequences of your actions.
Yeah. I think that's what's most intriguing. And then in the final episode, we also get the reveal that like Thaisa uh, like sacrificed the family dog as well as did some other creepy shit. And that seems like they're alluding to that
That's how she won.
she won the Senate race by like a small margin because she prayed to this demon or whatever they're doing. And who the hell is calling me again? So yeah, I don't know. Like I'm definitely like, man, I think I would have preferred this as a miniseries. I will say, like, I think there are some great performances from some great, character actors like Christina Ricci and Juliette Lewis and Melanie Lynskey and Tawny Cypress as the adult versions of these characters. I think they're all great, even if I wasn't as interested in their plot lines as their younger versions of them. And then all the younger women in the show, like Sophie Nélisse and Jasmin Savoy Brown, who's in the recent Scream movie, I think that just came out as well, which we haven't seen yet. But
And was in The Leftovers.
and The Leftovers,
which
I
there are
just
no
watched.
leftovers in the woods.
No. But all of the young women are great. The young men
and
in
Sophie
the show,
Thatcher as well, who we talked a little bit on the regular show, appearing in the Book of Boba Fett as well. It's a really good cast, and to your point, like, even though the present day stuff is the weakest, it's really great to see Melanie Lynskey get a lead role and really kind of show an incredible range of what she has as an actor. And she's been around for so long. Like, thinking about like Peter Jackson's Heavenly Creatures, which was, a mid to late 90s kind of art house film that really kind of catapulted Kate Winslet's career. She's been working for so long, and like thinking like even, more recently with both Don't Look Up and Up in the Air, and thinking like, she just continues to work and give really good performances and do a wide range of sort of genres. And Christina Ricci, I think you can tell, is having a blast playing Misty, and sort of like, I made a joke on Twitter that the true villain of this whole thing is Andrew Lloyd Webber, because every time that you're with that character,
Mr. Mistopheles,
they're playing, it's either, Phantom of the Opera or Cats. And like, her interest in show tunes is almost very sinister, that she names her pet bird Caligula. Like, it's like like it's having fun with sort of the theatrical elements of the show, and kind of playing into the pulpy nature of it all. And I can really appreciate that, but I'm also still wary with like, how far is this going to like extend, and like, are we going to draw this thing out until like, what is the end?
I don't know where
here?
it can go, because like, how quickly do they get to cannibalism in the past? I guess.
Yeah.
Where does this Lottie as a cult leader still a cannibal, still a cult leader, maybe involved in Travis's murder? Kind of, maybe she's trying to take out the other Yellowjackets, but then you see that Misty was on her side in the past, but then now Thaisa is the one possibly praying to this demon or to Lottie or whoever in the present to win. And then she has that sinister smile. Is just like, I have no idea where the show is going. And I guess that's kind of intriguing, but then I just can't fathom it being spread out over 4 more seasons, especially I guess like, we don't know when that scene takes place of them eating the girl in the beginning, right?
Right.
Like, we don't know if that's near what, like, they've been doing it for a while. Is that the first person they kill and eat? Is it like, it looks like the first person they're going to kill and eat was the coach at one point, because like they were leading to Travis doing it, and there's that weird orgy stuff, and like they were going to kill him after they all do shrooms. And like, I guess the show's saying, don't do shrooms, you might want to eat someone. So like, there's weird that you might want to have an orgy and then eat someone, and then
don't play with your food.
Yeah. God. And I just how like nasty the show gets sometimes too. I appreciate you had some good genre filmmakers coming in, like Karen Kusama directing the pilot, Deepa Mehta directed an episode. And then you have even someone like Eduardo Sanchez, who directed the original Blair Witch Project, come in and direct the finales. So you can kind of see the vibe that they're going for, and other people came in as well. But yeah, I wish it was nicely tied up in like a nice bow in one season and then just been in and out, but I'm not against it continuing. It just kind of has to win me over. Where, the first season, obviously Eric and I both really, really enjoyed it, but like, and obviously those comparisons to Lost and those other survival things that
Well,
Eric
even Twin
mentions, like
Peaks, right?
Twin
Like
Peaks to an
the
extent, yeah.
supernatural stuff, and like even with the end of this season, like it almost reminds me of the end of season 1 of Twin Peaks, where the cliffhanger was you didn't get the reveal of who Laura's killer was, but instead you had, Dale Cooper being shot and everybody wondering what was going to happen next. And then the second season was almost like, David Lynch and Mark Frost were like, oh, we didn't really think that this was going to continue. And so now we have to continue into season 2 and kind of write stuff and extend stuff and over explain everything. And I feel like even though like the idea behind this is like, okay, it's 5 seasons, but winter's already hit. So are you going to have like season 4 and 5 where the past versions are reacclimatizing back into, climatizing back into society? And like, is that going to be a thing like, again, Lost, where you have some of the characters get off the island and sort of go back into daily
does
life?
Lottie stay? Like, that's what I mean. Like, maybe they don't know Lottie's alive. Like, maybe Lottie did stay and she was part of that one group that liked living out in the woods. But then if the other women went, who would you hunt? I know they eat a bear at one point, like, because Lottie,
and that scene's not great because of
that
like the
CG's
way
bad.
that it's composited. Yeah, it's
is
but
really
but I
bad,
understand both the budgetary restrictions for that and also the safety precautions for doing
Sure.
that as well. But it doesn't look great. Like, that is one of the few moments in the series where it's kind of like, okay, like maybe there was a better way to do this or cut around it a little bit more. But yeah, it doesn't work.
So, and I think my biggest issue is that I don't know what this season's arc was, right? Like, it's a similar complaint that I have to Dune Part 1, where, and I know television is an ongoing format, especially when something isn't a mini series. But I do feel like each season of a show kind of still needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then you're supposed to leave questions for the seasons moving forward. And I guess you do have that because you have the whole Shauna and Jackie storyline in the past, which I guess was the biggest one. You have, I guess, the Lottie stuff that they were teasing, Misty's stuff that they were teasing. And then in the present, you have the Travis stuff, the Senate race, and the affair. So I guess you tied up those and finished them, but like, I don't know. It never felt like this season had a complete arc, if that makes sense. Like, it
Right.
just,
I think the arc overall, like, is probably, this almost feels like again, I said that like in each episode you kind of follow one of the characters, but it does feel like it is Melanie Lynskey's season, where like it is really, a lot of it is from Shauna's perspective, both past and present, and sort of introducing the world, and like her diary that she writes in, those journals that she has where she keeps them in her safe, is basically like almost like the key to all of this. That, everything that's written in there is an account of what happened. She knows what happens, her husband knows what happened, the characters that are still alive know what happened, the rest of the world has an idea of what happened because it was so sensationalized and caught it up in the media, but we don't know everything yet, and we're being given pieces of the puzzle but not the whole thing. And so our reaction is more sort of energized than theirs are, because they're worrying about, like, Shauna's worrying about the blackmail thing, but also now having an affair, and that her husband's having an affair. There's a great moment where her husband is more sort of surprised that book club doesn't exist than anything else, which is actually very
There's some good humor
funny.
in the show too.
Yeah, it does have a very dark sense of humor, and I think even in like the very obvious needle drops of 90s music that play, like, it is wall-to-wall music, a lot of it as well, which I wasn't expecting at first, because again, like, you think like a show that takes place in the middle of nowhere for the most part, that's very isolated in the
Has
past,
supernatural elements.
but it still has like a lot of like music that you would expect like was popular in 96, but in the 90s in general. And yeah, I think it is like picking up a paperback novel before getting on a plane and watching or reading that book
before that
while
plane crashes,
before,
and then before you eat your friends.
yeah, and eating magic mushrooms. But it has that kind of pulpy quality where it's like, I think it's a really fun show.
Yeah.
But I also think that like it works the best as a weekly series, because like I kind of came into it late, so I watched like 5 or 6 episodes before kind of like getting caught up with like and watching it in real time. But I felt like watching it in kind of like 3 or 4 episode sittings, or 3 episode sittings, it wasn't the same as karate as Cobra Kai, or with like that series, because that feels like you can just keep watching it, where this, I kind of got my fill of it after like 2 episodes,
and you almost needed time to decompress and think about the episode. And then and a show with this that has mysteries and is withholding information, it is fun week to week to see people tweet about it or talk to one another, or the theories that are out online. Like, there's some wild stuff that people think based on the visual cues that we've gotten, like the necklace, or the girl's hair in that opening scene doesn't look like anyone that is with them right now. So some people think that might even be a flash forward, and that part of Lottie's cult is like recreating events that happened in the woods and stuff, like in the present and stuff like that. And I don't know, like, I'm intrigued to see where it goes. I have no idea where it goes though. Like, the other little threads that we got in that final episode were Shauna's daughter kind of knows that guy went missing, because he was reported missing right away, that they kill. We didn't even go over that Shauna ends up killing him by accident, thinking that he was involved, and then he might not have been involved, and then they all cut up his body and dispose of his body. And it's got that very bad things
kind of like vibe to it, where like that's when again they bring in Christina Ricci's Misty, because she kind of has this morbid fascination
of the group.
Yeah. And I actually, again, like, it was really fun watching that performance, because it's very cartoonish. But like, I know you just watched Dexter New Blood, but I almost feel like Christina Ricci is like doing her own version of Dexter in this case. So it's but yeah, it's
so where do you see it going? Like, what, like,
honestly, I see them, and I don't want to like, like create that narrative for myself, but if I were guessing, I would say that like you're gonna get the next season where you're going to have Lottie play a huge part of it, and to the point where she probably will be like maybe the 4th main character.
Yeah, they'll cast someone as adult Lottie.
And sort of like it'll be from her perspective in a couple of episodes, and then maybe we'll get more of like, okay, if there are there survivors that made it out of that situation, maybe they're a part of the cult as well. And we'll probably, like, that's the other thing, like I'm sure like with the next season we'll get like more into like, okay, maybe a couple other characters die, because in this season we get a couple characters deaths. Like, we get the one religious girl who dies, and like that's kind of definitive, and then Jackie dies by freezing to death. And I actually even thought that was kind of
do they eat Jackie? Probably, right?
Or not, maybe not. Maybe they just, or maybe they're not at that point yet. Like, but maybe they could. I don't know. I mean, like, again, we're not there. But I could see that kind of being debated in the next episode, or episode 11 of season 2, where like they're talking about like, okay, well, she's dead, so, and we don't have any food, like maybe that'll be the tipping point. Maybe that is like
And I do
it's like,
think you're going to see a divide in the
yeah,
girls or the people who are there. Like, I actually think you'll see Travis and Juliette Lewis. Sorry, the younger version of her. What's the actress's name?
Sophie Thatcher.
Yeah, Sophie Thatcher. And like, I feel like they'll be on the side that doesn't eat people, or like,
Yeah.
that are on the other side of things. And then, um, yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. And then where the present day stuff goes with the daughter and the Senate thing is like, is Thaisa part of this cult and now she's running? She's a senator.
Or
Like,
maybe she's not a part of the cult, but she kind of picked up on stuff when she was in the woods and is doing her own thing, because
yeah,
it seems like when you're a part of a cult, you're basically trying to, work as a unit or serve a cult leader, where this
right.
seems like she's serving her own purpose, but using the supernatural aspects that maybe she picked up when she was in the forest and from Lottie to kind of
Yeah,
benefit herself.
that's true. Because we do see like 9 of them in that opening sequence, all with like and we know Misty and Van are 2 of the 3, and Lottie being one of them. But then there are 5 others that are with them. So like, do they all just go that way? Because then the 5 others would be, Shauna, Thaisa, um, Nat, and the coach doesn't look anywhere around. He's getting eaten for sure.
Oh yeah, he's done.
Yeah, he's absolutely getting eaten. But I
Well,
can't
Travis's
see.
brother, like what's going on
Yeah,
with
because
him?
he's missing, right? Because of the
Yeah.
shroom trip. But then I'm trying to think of who else would even be there. Because Laura Lee's dead. There's Mari is alive. But that's why I think that scene, there's something off there, right? Especially with the necklace and things like that. So I don't know. We got 4 more seasons of it. I'm definitely intrigued to see where it goes. Even if I had issues with this first season, it was still incredibly enjoyable and incredibly addicting. So
Kiss from a Rose gets 2
yeah,
plays in this, 2
yeah.
big plays.
The
So Seal's
90s, man.
collecting that
We're getting a lot of
residual
shows that are
check.
taking place in the 90s lately. Because we have Pam and Tommy coming up, and um I'm all for it. But the
Well,
needle
even Resident Evil, Welcome to
yeah.
Raccoon City in
Yeah.
'98, right?
All the needle drops have been a lot of fun in these shows. So are we going to rate this? I guess we are, right?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
give it a 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
I think it's a fun show. It kind of passes the time, and there's enough intrigue to kind of keep you going through the whole season. I just hope it doesn't run out of steam before it gets to its final destination, which would be disappointing, because it does have enough there to keep you going and to sustain you for at least maybe one more season or 2 before I would say like, okay, like how are they going to keep this thing going? Because again, like are they going to spend time with the past versions of these characters sort of?
After they get home.
Yeah, like it's
Yeah.
just, I don't know
I
like
think that
what
you'd
they're.
have to with 5
Yeah.
seasons. I don't know. So we'll see. I'm curious. I'm also going to give it a 4 out of 5. I think it's very, very enjoyable. Thank you all for listening. If you like this, please go check out our other podcast, Untitled Movie Podcast, where we just put up our 111th episode. Has a lot of nonsense, but I think it's a lot of fun nonsense. We also talk about the history of the Jackass franchise. We also have our 22 most anticipated films of 2022, as well as our best films of last year episode. So you guys can check that out. We also have reviews for The After Party and Peacemaker, the first 3 episodes of both those shows, The Tragedy of Macbeth, and much more over on the reviews channel. And we also put up a conversation about our thoughts on the Moon Knight trailer, as well as where we think the MCU is headed, which is a conversation I love revisiting. So go check that out on the Conversations channel. If you want a one-stop shop for everything, just head over to our Letterboxd, which is Untitled_movies. We'll have links to the conversation, the reviews, the main show over on Letterboxd. It's probably your easiest spot for all of that stuff. So as always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com. And you can find me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Marchin. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Gotta keep them separated.
Bow, 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 bow.